One, two, three.
Welcome to the Smartest Amazon Seller Podcast. It's your host, Scott Needham. We're going to talk about some good stuff. We're gonna touch on AI. We're going to touch on Amazon, and maybe even a mix of the both. But then we're also going to talk about a lot of other things that helps or what Amazon professionals are thinking in 2025. And when I say Amazon professional, I use that term very loosely. You could listen in if you're a reseller, if you're an agency, if you're a private label brand, or another sleazy service provider like myself. All things apply. Well, I have with me a guest, someone that is actually really good for this conversation because he's on the front lines of talking to Amazon sellers all the time. I have Noah Wickham, VP of Sales and Marketing at My Amazon Guy. Noah, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Scott. Excited to be here.
All right. Well, you know what? We didn't. I was writing a bunch of notes of what we could talk about. Didn't even mention like I've never done an Accelerate recap. We could talk for an hour, but I'm going to push us through. I'm going to push us through some of these topics. That way we get more value packed. This reminds me, like if people are listening in, I've started to not do a podcast every week. I did every week for about 5 years. And so I just had a lot of other, interests but Noah passed the bar for interesting people. But it also feels like I've got a lot on my chest of stuff I haven't, thrown out to the ether. Here we go. Noah, now I spoke with Stephen Pope, who's been a guest maybe twice. He's the founder of My Amazon Guy. And in his words, he would be very comfortable with you taking over as CEO of My Amazon Guy. Interesting. So how did that happen? What's your background?
That's a great question. That's actually a really good question. I mean, background wise, I've been in e-commerce for over a decade, right? I mean, I've had my own brands. I've told a story a million times on, other stuff of like how I started, right? The age old tale of I was selling trading cards on eBay, actually back in the day. And that's kind of how I got my foot in. And, I've been down every rabbit hole, the drop shipping, the white labeling, the private labeling, creating my own brands and eventually getting it on my way on Amazon.
Okay. Of all of those, not based off of, I just want to ask what was your favorite of those? And those doesn't necessarily have to be most profitable, but what was your favorite?
I think my favorite probably, just going back to it, my favorite at the end of the day probably was just the trading cards and stuff like that, and totally. Reselling and stuff, just because usually I would only focus on things I personally knew and I used and would be it's something I'd buy, right? And so there's a vested interest there. So that was always my favorite, right? It's always really fun to build a brand and do that from scratch and see it grow and see that, number of sales every month tick up and tick up and tick up. But
yeah. I think I had I dabbled with a few eBay sales, not a lot, also a few random Amazon sales. But once I went and started doing it professionally as a reseller, it actually being a reseller feels closer to the you're not building a brand, so you're not spending your time thinking about brand. You're thinking about numbers, and every sale is
it's exhilarating.
Yeah. You get to chase that high, and so man, there was really a lot of fun moments in that.
No, yeah, it was.
Then how did you get into the My Amazon Guy ecosystem? And for those that don't know, that they're a very large agency. I'd say like large, hundreds of employees and hundreds of clients.
500 employees, 430 brands. We're growing every day, and it's interesting because after selling a couple of my brands, I ended up getting into kind of consulting. And I consulted with a bunch of different brands and kind of turned that into my own little agency for a while, and then moved over to a startup for a while. And it was just a random happenstance where someone I had met at Prosper Show in 2023, I think it was, reached out to me. There was a director position here at MAG, and they knew me and everything. They thought about me, and they're like, "Hey, you want to, potentially have this job?" And I was just, in between places thinking about, am I going to start a new brand right now? Am I going to do my own agency thing right now? And I was like, sure, why not? Right. And it was one of those where I kind of immediately got into MAG, and I was just like, I love it here. Right. It's great here. I love the culture. I love people. But I also saw a ton of stuff that like needed work, I think is the biggest thing. And I had a conversation with Steven, and it's still so vivid in my head. It was the second conversation he and I ever had. And he was sitting down, and he basically wanted an unbiased kind of third party opinion on something having to do with MAG, of like MAG's growth and also some of the people that we had internally at the company and everything. And it was super weird for, the founder and CEO of the company to be talking to a guy who had been working there for maybe, a month and that has never really talked to him before. But he just wanted that, unbiased opinion, I guess. And I gave him my opinion on like exactly thinking like, hey, we're not going to grow past where we currently are unless we do X, Y, and Z. And because there is a cap to what we are doing. And, that conversation spurred into further conversations. And one day, Steven just, we had a client or a prospect that came in, and Steven sent the prospect over to me. It was like 5:30 on Friday. And he's like, hey, all the other account executives are out. Can you try and call this person and close them? Mind you, I wasn't a salesperson. I've never really done sales before, like in the true essence. And for some reason, Steven sent that. So I called them. I talked to them for 30 minutes or so. I sent them a contract and they closed. And Steven then asked me how I felt. And I'm like, this doesn't change my opinion. I hate sales. And so Steven then, fast forward, we end up taking, he takes me and another person on our executive team to a trip in Colombia a couple months later. And at the time, I didn't realize this was a Stephen Pope test. He essentially wanted to see, could Noah hang and could Noah go through adversity? And did I go through adversity? We did a 3-day pilgrimage through the jungle in Colombia. And during that time, I very first night got sick, literally like puking my guts out, just like vomiting. Like I could not keep water down even. And so I spent the next 3 days having to ride a mule through the Colombian jungle to reach the lost city. And so that all the while, there's tons of great pictures of Steven the entire time, basically shoving a camera in my face every opportunity he got to take pictures as well. So I have to send some of those to you, Scott. And
I can relate. I've had a few new employees, and like they were like interns, and they're like, "Hey Scott, how do we do better at our job?" Or like this, and I was like, "You know what? You want to do better? Just sell on Amazon." Just like, and I took them. And we went to some local retail stores and we just flipped a few products and they loved it. But like, I also got to like spend like time with them and just be like, and by the end, like there's nothing that I could have like said that would have helped them understand what it's like other than just doing it themselves.
It's true. It was definitely different, right? Like I appreciated that experience from the aspect that it also got me to kind of also know Steven more. Cause again, at this point in time, I had never met Steven before until that trip. And,
I'm going to jump straight to a quote from Steven. I talked to him last week and I was like, hey, there's this AI tool that I'm working on. And he's like, okay. He's like, that's cool. I think you'll be successful, but people don't ask me for SEO services. No one comes to an agency being like, "Oh my goodness, can you help me with SEO?" He's like improve the bullet points, use the right keywords, use all the tools. No one's like doing that. But what they are asking him and agencies is like, "Hey, can you grow my Amazon account? Can you run my ads? Can you fix my problems with my catalog or compliance or whatever?" Like, he's like, that's it. That's all that people come and ask. They don't ask, even in spite of the fact that Steven's come on here and on other podcasts to talk about SEO, no one asks him to do that.
Sellers and brands don't care how you grow them. They never will, right? There is nobody in the world who is like, yeah, I want to make more sales. And they're like, but I need to know exactly how I'm doing that, right? They care about two things and two things only: growing their sales and staying profitable. If you can do and that for any brand whatsoever, they will be happy with you. They do not
Okay.
care if you give them the prettiest designs and images in the world. They don't care if you're talking about your SEO and everything and like how you're going to improve it for them, everything. If those things don't translate whatever you're doing for any brand or seller into more sales and being more profitable, they don't care, right? That's
Okay.
the only two goals at the end of the day as being an Amazon seller.
And I presume, but like, that just kind of leads to the question of like, well, what grows those two things? And SEO, is that an answer?
SEO is an answer. I mean, it's a variety, right? I mean, it's SEO. It is the design. It is the advertising. It is, specific strategies and actions you take on the account. Doing dynamic pricing, changing your pricing, like all of the. There's so many levers I think in this day and age on Amazon to pull. I mean, I think back again, like 10 years ago, you could snap a photo on your phone of just a product on your desk or something like that, throw it up with a 20-30 character title, and just instantly get organic sales. Like you can't do that in this day and age, right?
Yeah,
So, but there's also just so many levers to pull nowadays. I mean, it still, I think, comes down to like four key elements, so to speak. And that's, your SEO, your design, your advertising, and your merchandising. Those are like the core four pillars, in my opinion, of
yeah,
like growth, so to speak.
totally. Well, so we just got back about 2 weeks ago from Amazon's Accelerate event, and I could share some of our insights. Like it, it was the oh crap. I don't want to like say superlatives, but like it was the best Accelerate that I've been to, and it has become our best conference. Because there were thousands of people. It was full. Amazon shows up in a big way. I'm pretty sure they lose, they lose, I heard on the order of like 10 to $15 million, just to like, you could tell, like you see where they invest the money. They're giving out food, shirts, everything. We had a booth next to the food, and food was available 3 times a day. So like, we're like A+ location. Couldn't have asked for a better spot, because people just ended up over there in that corner. And I thought the food was really good, but
I did too. The thing that I will say that bugs me so much about like conferences in general is just going, especially the ones in Vegas. You go to conferences and there's just no food ever. And if there is food, you have to usually pay more for it. And most of the time there's like, no, yeah, go to these restaurants over here. They're quote unquote sponsored by the event. And it's like you're paying $80 for lunch. I'm like, okay, well, it's
yeah.
already expensive enough being here and whatnot. And they're just going to starve you the whole
Well,
time.
the problem is like I'm easy to please. If I'm hungry, any food is good. I don't care.
Very much so.
But like Amazon had some big announcements. Like obviously they're trying to wrap themselves in AI. Um, Still to be determined on like any real difference makers. They launched a profits tool. They for the first time, I've been going to Amazon's seller conferences since like 2014, and this was the first time that the CEO showed up. So, um, and only relevant if you've never heard about their history, but like, I'm very familiar with their history. So he really didn't teach me too much new, but still, a check on the box.
I thought the talk was kind of interesting. That being said, I immediately saw the fact that if you watched like his last 3 interviews he's done, it's the exact same conversation, exact same.
Yeah,
talk.
no, it was CEO speak. It wasn't.
Yeah, it was. He has a talk track he likes to go through.
Actually,
for sure.
So we did an event, and I talked with a guy that was like a very serious bookseller. Like he showed me his warehouse, and we're talking like just tens of thousands of books. One of the top booksellers, and he's like, "Oh, I was at the first time they brought in sellers. Like it was like the year 2000, and it's a picture of him, 15 sellers, and Jeff Bezos." And
that's crazy.
I was like, "Okay, now we're talking." That's That was probably a very raw
Yeah. You
conversation.
can't even get a photo op with Andy Jassy. I tried.
Did you?
I
Yeah.
did. And they would not let you get close to him, unfortunately. Very large men in suits stopped you if you tried.
Well, I always I like that because there's a few people in this world that like uh, you can make money if you know if something bad happens to them.
Yeah.
uh, you know, like it's like they deserve every bit of security because people can really benefit. Well, that's not the direction I expected to go, but I did want to give a few thoughts on Accelerate. Just that
Sure.
there was a lot of AI, and I'm working on something, and I'm actually happy to tease it and talk about it. But what it really is a lot of people are like more than ever are using ChatGPT to like explore products or I think I saw 2% of queries of the hundreds of millions, but 2% of them are very like e-commerce focused or like product focused. And we're going to build a tool that measures that for Amazon or even like other e-commerce, but basically measures like, hey, I'm looking for a protein drink that fits like, that's got a good flavor, this and this. Show me the top 5 on Amazon. And so we're going to build that I guess your mention your visibility, how often you're mentioned compared to your competitors and like what positions and so forth. That's it. That's the product.
I
And
think, I think it's great. I will say primary problems immediately that I see is like it needs to be run off like Rufus, like Amazon's AI. Because big thing. So like obviously this week is big news for those that don't know that like
yeah,
ChatGPT opened up the new merchant thing, right? And it's gonna be it's first rolled out for Etsy sellers and Etsy products, and next it's gonna be rolled out for Shopify. And a lot of people are questioning like, oh, why isn't Amazon part of this, right? You would think that like them being such a giant that they would do that. And the entire reason is that like for those that are uninitiated, Amazon doesn't let any AIs scrape its website right
yeah,
now. Like if you try, and it's one of the things that I think is so funny about so many of these like chat GPT like wrapper tools that I've been seeing come out that like people are vibe coding everything and like they do really cool things and they talk about like listings, but people are like, oh, it scrapes your Amazon ASIN, it scrapes your listing and everything. It doesn't, because it literally can't. Most of the time what it does is it pulls from like other markets outside the US. Because for instance, like Saudi Arabia, you can actually scrape Amazon Saudi Arabia listings, and so
okay, yeah. No,
it's
we're not planning on just ChatGPT. Obviously, like Rufus results, uh, everything, but basically measuring that, and
I think that's
then
impactful.
yeah, and then it's like, okay, how do I improve this? And truthfully, it's generally it's just normal good practice of building out content and listings. I did notice that like uh, Amazon's like Cosmo, which is like one of their AI things, talked about 15 different questions that your product could answer that like actually helps the AI like know how to index or talk about it or think about it. So yeah, that's a fun
I
one.
like it.
That,
I mean,
that that was
it's
actually when I mentioned that. That's what Steven said. Like, but people don't ask me about SEO. So I I
and
hear
they
what he's
don't. And
saying.
it's interesting because like I think AI in general is realistically like shaking up how people search for things,
Yeah,
right? The
that
majority of people I think right now who are like using let's say ChatGPT, I don't think they're actually using like a tool. I think they're basically using it as a Google replacement, essentially.
well, right. If you look at like how consumers their life has changed with AI, really, it's just asking ChatGPT questions. Like I I ask it fitness questions all the time. I'm like
Just gives
hey,
you a better answer.
I did pull ups yesterday. What if I do them today? Is that like what I mean? Like little things about like that you can kind of challenge very specific things of um, should I wait every other day? I don't know. I'm a stay at home dad basically that like I think about pull ups. um, no, I'm just trying to like get back to my all time high. But the thing is how consumers have changed I think there still is a new data set of tools around that. There are Google SEO tools that are doing what I'm talking about, but I want to build the one for Amazon. But there's some
I
risk.
think I think it's impactful, right, for like sellers at the end of the
Yeah.
day. The thing that I will say from like, and I'm sure the numbers and data have changed. We did a poll analysis of 500 people back in January, February of this year, sometime like that. And I wanted to see how many people actually know about Rufus and how many people actively utilize it, right? On a regular basis. And the data was crazy because it was something like only 13% of that 500 knew what Rufus was. And then only 4% had used it and actively used it often of like 500. And sure, it's a pretty small sample size at the end of the day. And that was like 8 months ago. I bet I do that same exact thing today. And it's at least doubled, if not tripled
Really?
in overall value. I would imagine it.
I,
Amazon
I
did such a poor push of it, whereas nowadays, if you ever go on your app, like it's right there in your face all the time. It's
okay.
constantly popping up on the desktop. It pops up. I think that was a big thing. And don't get me wrong, I think Rufus is still up in the air. I think but
Yeah.
GEO in general is going to be the new SEO or another variation of it.
Totally. And I'm just getting started learning. It's interesting, and we'll have a product to launch in just a few weeks, and I'll learn real quick if this is
Let me
valuable,
know, Scott.
possible,
I'll
whatever.
I'll help you test.
Yeah. Well, here's something that I already know that you guys jump in on. Every year we've done. Well, this is our second year doing this Golden Seller Awards. You guys show up big. In fact, becoming a leader in some of the categories. And part of this is just to announce to the audience, like, hey, right now is the nomination period, October, but like November is like when the voting happens. And so, jump in on that.
Self plug, vote my
Yeah,
Amazon guy.
yeah. Like, you got to be a part for the announcement so you can
It's
sway.
always one of those things. I kind of talked about it earlier today when I had like made my post about it, and I've always had this mentality for like years now of I don't care about awards except for the ones that I win.
That's
It's the best way to typically look at any type of the awards and everything that go on is like I always look at it from the aspect of like what does it do for me, right? But then I kind of like don't care about them. But then if I win it, it's great. It's awesome. This is the most important thing. So,
I'm going to
we
quote
showed
you
up.
on that. Maybe that's going to be my announcement. Yeah, I don't care about awards except for the ones that I win.
There you go.
Well, I'm sure you guys will be leaders in some categories. So just try not to win everything.
I'm going for that rising star this year.
There you
I'm
go.
going to beat
Yeah,
out
yeah,
John
yeah, yeah.
Axel
There
and
you go.
Vanessa Hung.
Um, uh, well, you can't win the Rising Star 2 years in a row. That's just like that's cheating. Because like that Rising Star is supposed to be like like the newcomer on the block. So
I feel like I'm a fairly newcomer.
yeah. I think I'm going to go in and make that one. So you can only win it once.
I think that's a good idea. I think some of them it should be like that, especially.
There's got to be some rotation.
Yeah, there has to at some point in
time. Well, so last question I want to ask is, what's it like to run hundreds of seller accounts? Like hundreds. I've talked to a lot of agencies that do 40, 50, even 100, but 400 plus. You probably there's always one in crisis.
And so it's this really, I think, funny thing, right? When you're the size that you are of my Amazon guy, right? And how many brands we touch over 1,000 brands per year, whether it's us full managing it or doing just a one-off web order type of thing for them, an a la carte A+ content, right? So we're constantly working with like 1,000+ brands per year. And it's always this kind of interesting thing of, you're right, there's always one that's like, quote unquote, in crisis. And usually for like smaller agencies, and having like also ran my own kind of small agency at one point in time, I had 22 clients at like my peak, right? And yeah, when you have like one in crisis, that one becomes like your top priority that you are like all hands on deck for, trying to like do everything you can to keep them around. Whereas here it's not really like that, right? And not that's not to say if a brand is in crisis, quote unquote, that it's not important and you don't focus on it, because we absolutely do. But the differentiator is that there's so many minds that we can tap on in each kind of capacity, and it gives us so much flexibility. We have an entire team internally that like that's their entire job, is literally just like, hey, this brand is having trouble right now, let's get on a call, let's talk through, let's look at some data and figure out what is the issue here, right? And how can we continuously grow this client? And the age old saying of basically ask the client what they want, give it to them, and then ask the client again, did you get what you want? Right? That is like the simplest way to keep clients happy. And it's what we kind of have as an internal motto, right? For
Yeah,
all of our.
I like that.
Yeah. And,
It's very simple.
at the end of the day, there's no real major differentiator, in my opinion, from like, an agency that is 40 versus 400, except that I feel the reason I've coached, CEOs and founders of like small agencies at this point, like tons and dozens of them. And the biggest thing I tend to see with people who like have a hard time scaling their agency is that they are too afraid to be flexible with process, which is something that I think we are really good at doing. We're very good at like pivoting when we need to pivot, but we're very rigid only in the sense that we want people to follow processes, SOPs, and checklists. So we essentially are like, okay, we want to do this new thing now. Cool. This year we decided to launch direct to consumer, Shopify, Google Ads, Meta Ads, things like that. We basically did that in the course of a week, where we just decided to pivot. We immediately started asking clients. We were like, hey, do you want us to build you a Shopify store and do all your Google and Meta advertising? Awesome. Hired the people for it and immediately put the processes and SOPs in place to start doing it. And I think that's one of those things that like speed in general is always my favorite motto, and everything. I'm sure, again, with the whole Stephen wanting me to be CEO, I think that's part of it is, there's nothing better than speed, in my opinion, because essentially for somebody who wants to be a perfectionist, by the time that a perfectionist launches one solution to something that they're pretty confident in, but not 100%, somebody who focuses on speed to execution can launch 10 different variations and fail at 9 of them, but find the perfect one the 10th time. Right.
Yeah.
And I'd much rather have all those learning experiences failing at things to have that, to know how we can move forward. And that's, a big part of it.
I'm totally the same way. I've got one last kind of question that I didn't think I was going to come up with. I heard the phrase yesterday, listened to the guy that wrote this book. I think it's called Unreasonable Hospitality. And he didn't do a great job of explaining it in a B2B context. And I'm how can we show unreasonable hospitality? You mean that you go above and beyond to make people like remember something real, as opposed to like a thank you card is like just like reasonable. Like, how do you go beyond something like that? Do you think there's anything that you guys do that it like, catch people a little bit different? You're like, oh, like that was real. That was like, okay.
I don't know if I would necessarily call it different, right? Because I think it's something that like anybody could do. It's just, I think it's things that places don't do, right? Okay. So things like how fast we onboard people, right? I've talked to other agencies and they're like, yeah, our typical onboarding process is about 30 days long. And that's insanity to me. We sit on a typical 24-hour onboarding. You essentially sign your deal. We send out onboarding documents. An hour later, we have your new team member call you within 3 hours. And then within 24 hours, we're in your account already optimizing advertising campaigns and SEO, right? And that is like our standard SLA. Same thing with like communication. We do 48-hour proactive communication. Like those are the type of things that I think any company can do. It's not like a giant differentiator, but it's one of those that like we're so adamant and rigid to keeping those SLAs and making sure that like our team members
I
follow them.
love that because everyone is feeling like, okay, what are they going to do for me? Like, it's like it's a first impression. It's also just like no one. I mean, like just seeing proactive work, like that's really
A month's
sharp.
worth of work in your first week is what we like to say.
Yeah, totally. Um, and that will last, a long ways. Um, uh, I'm still noodling on this from like, I feel like from a B2B, it's harder
Yeah.
than like, if you're a restaurateur and you're like, you want to give someone like a unique, like, moment, like you can do that because like you're in there with their food, like, and
It's
you
the
got that
difference
like,
between like B2B and B2C, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a business transaction,
yeah,
and it comes back to the thing we were talking about.
there's,
If
here's one thing that I've done and I haven't repeated it, but I had someone give a compliment to my sales member. She's like, "We love Caitlin. She was patient. She was just like a friend. We were slow. This was like a 4 or 5 month process, and but we wouldn't have done this if it weren't for her. Like Caitlin was just so great." And I went and I was like, well, how do I like pass this message on to Caitlin in a way that's like real? Um, this company, she was a brand manager for a company that like sold like cookies, like low, like high protein cookie kind of thing. And so I bought a bunch of those cookies and I gave them to Caitlin, put them on her desk, and that kind of like closed the circle where like she gets the gratitude, the cookie brand, she's like, oh wow, like I actually helped Caitlin in a way I didn't expect. So I wish, and I was literally having this conversation yesterday. I was like, I wish I could, say before we ever have a call with a brand, like we just be a customer of them for a second, buy their product, and by the time they're on the call, we have it with us. I'm like, there's something there. I haven't quite. My sales guy was like, I don't know. Like some people don't care about their product that they sell. I'm like, well, they got to care a little bit.
A little bit, right? It's one of the. I mean, it's the same thing. And where I kind of think that it comes all the way full circle back to what we initially talked about in the sense of like, what do sellers care about? They care about sales growth, profitability, right? And like, I think that's the hard part about hospitality is you basically like you can be the most proactive, the most communicative, like you can, do all these great things, update the SEO, update the design. But if you're not meeting those two things,
Yeah.
doesn't matter how many things you're doing right. And like those are the things that like come back for that hospitality, I think.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. You got to have like a good business. It's kind of just like the flavor, the culture on top of it.
Yeah.
Because this was apparent at Accelerate. We've made a lot of friends. People come by us just to talk. Maybe they're like, their current customers or not. They've made friends, and like that's like one like thing we've got, but I don't know. I'm always hungry for what's like next about that. I'm always hungry for what's next in everything. That's kind of why I do the podcast.
So what makes you a great businessman, Scott?
Well, that's why I do the podcast because like I don't know. I need to know. I'm always curious, and but it sounds like you guys, your next is like you're running. You started new business lines.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, right? It's like there's so many different ways I think a company like ours, even how large we are, there's so many ways in my mind that like we can grow. And I think, again, going back to the idea of like speed and execution, I think that's a large part of it. Now, do we always 100% get that right on like the first try? No, but like I think that's part of it, right? Is being able to fail forward is a big thing that I always think of. And, and so that's why we're just kind of running with it, right? And we're running with different ideas and different ways to do it. And, I'm blessed at the end of the day to have, a great executive team around me as well with our, COO and, our VP of brand ops. And like, they're great to bounce those ideas off of. And they also understand that vision of like, let's execute on this. Let's do it today. Let's get it done. And, it helps at the end of the day. And so it's a big thing, more so. I'm trying to understand and be curious about that. And especially all the AI stuff. People are coming out with new stuff every single day with that.
Awesome. Well, Noah, thank you so much for jumping on, sharing lots of stories. So I look forward to, maybe seeing you at the next Accelerate, and anyone listening, I'll be there if I can. There's a chance got a young family, and it's a growing family. So no promises on any travel, but it was a great time.
I'm excited for next year, but yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Scott.
Okay. Thanks, Noah. Well, we'll wrap up there. Thanks everyone for listening in, and we'll catch you on the next one. That's the pod.
1, 2, 3.